I am Reverend Meg Biddle. I am the National Coordinator for Ministry Life and the American Baptist Personnel Services at the American Baptist Home Mission Societies. Thank you for joining us to what I'm calling Beyond the Walls, which is where we talk about ministry and life beyond the walls of the church. So today, joining me, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Linda Mercadante. Dr. Linda is scheduled to be one of our presenters at Space for Grace in Kansas City in September. Dr. Linda has an amazing biography, so I would encourage you to just Google her sometime and read all about her accomplishments. I'm gonna just talk about a couple of them real quick before Dr. Linda introduces herself, but she is the Distinguished Research Professor Emerita at Methodist Theological School. She is the founder of Healthy Beliefs, Healthy Spirit, a member of the Sausalito Valley Presbytery, and an active participant in many professional groups, including the American Academy of Religion and the work group of Constructive Theology. She's written 5 books and is currently working on her 6th. 2 of those books I do want to mention, and I will put those books down in the notes below. But 2 of those books that I wanted to be sure to mention is her memoir, Bloomfield Avenue, a Jewish Catholic Jersey girl's spiritual journey, and Belief Without Borders, Inside the Minds of the Spiritual but Not Religious. And again, I will list those in the notes below. But Dr. Linda, thank you so much for being the first from Space for Grace to join me for a conversation. And I wonder if you would please, for those who don't know you, just talk about yourself a little bit.
Okay. As a person that interviews other people, I know that a lot of people like to talk about themselves, so that's an easy one. Thank you for the introduction, Meg, and I'm very pleased and privileged to be on your video, and I hope that you get plenty of people to want to come to the conference, because it's exciting, and then it's in person, which, given that we've suffered through the pandemic, is exciting. Right. It's exciting in itself, right? So I'm looking forward to being there. I'm, how do I introduce myself? Well, I think I'm known now. I've been a theologian and a professor for a very long time, about 3 decades. And I came to it indirectly. I wasn't raised in organized religion. I wasn't raised in any kind of religion. I think this is relevant because my work I'm now known for being an expert on spiritual but not religious people and the phenomenon. And what got me into it is that I was one myself, but I didn't even start out that much of a seeker. I started out with no religion because my parents, who were of different religions, different ethnic groups, and they were immigrants, they, I think, decided to keep peace in the home. They would just not have any religion there. And they didn't practice their religions either. My mother was Jewish. My father was an Italian Catholic immigrant. And my mother was first generation in the U.S. So it was really considered shameful at that time to be in an interfaith marriage, which a lot of people today can't even imagine, but their parents objected to their love. They fell in love during World War II. My father looked very handsome in his uniform. Even though he was an immigrant, they put him in the army anyway. And he served for a long time right during the war. And so they fell in love and they had a great marriage, but their religions didn't think it was a good thing, which today we find odd because we say love is good, period, full stop, end of conversation. So they just put their religions on a back shelf, like wedding gifts that they were embarrassed of. And although the families got along well, I must say they did a good job in getting along, and we'd have parties together. But excuse me, they didn't give my brother or I any religion. But I was growing up in an Italian Catholic neighborhood in Newark, New Jersey, and I was very drawn to the church, to religion. There weren't any Jews really locally, so it wasn't an option for me. But my cousins were Catholic. Of course, the other cousins were Jewish. But there was a beautiful cathedral down the street, Sacred Heart Cathedral, which is now a papal basilica. It's amazing. And I was very drawn to it. Now, my mother was not in favor of this, but I was one of those crazy little kids that's spiritual, I guess, or drawn to religion, to God. And so I asked to be a Catholic, and my mother was very against it, but I was kind of, I guess, strong-willed in a nice way. And I went forward with it, picked my own godparents, got baptized at about the age of 7 or 8, and went through the usual rituals because my cousins were doing it and I could just tag along with them. But that was good for a while. But as I got older, I had a lot of theological questions. I couldn't understand why one religion would tell you to hate the other religion. It just made no sense at all. And so as I got older and closer to, I also met a lot of prejudice. I met a lot of anti-Semitism. I met a lot of anti-Catholicism. It was just, religion just seemed like a problem. And as I got older, I, grew away from it until finally one day after college, I woke up as an atheist. It wasn't a choice. It just happened. And it was not really comfortable for me. I mean, it was just, I didn't have any ground to stand on. When I had been a Catholic as a child, briefly, I did learn about God, and I found that extremely helpful. And they did have a lot of answers to my questions. Some of their answers weren't that great, but some of them were. And so I had it. I had some kind of a faith. But as I got older and I realized that the church had done a lot of things that weren't in my best interest, I fell away and woke up one day as an atheist. Again, I didn't find it spiritually fulfilling. And so I set out on a pilgrimage, and I ended up becoming a spiritual but not religious person. They didn't use those terms when I was little. When I was a young adult, they didn't use those terms, but that's what I was. And I searched and tried everything. I mean, I tried everything, and not all things that were, in the normal organized church world. But eventually, and this is crazy, but eventually I was a newspaper reporter for a long time, and I really loved that work. So I was an inquirer, and I could ask good questions. And eventually I took a backpack, took a leave of absence, went to Europe, was hitchhiking around, and happened upon this retreat center, which to me looked like a hippie commune. And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of a hippie. That's good. So I stayed there for a while, and it turns out they were Christian. And they got me to read the Bible. And I finally had a moment of enlightenment. And I went, oh, my half and half background, which everyone told me I was nothing in religious terms, and I was going to go to hell. When I finally started reading the Bible and I got to start understanding these things, I had a conversion experience and I became a Christian. Now, that wasn't the end of the story, because the people I was with had some of the same beliefs that were not helping me as a woman. And so I continued on. Now, I was an actual Christian, but I continued on. It's a long story, but I wended my way and finally found a home in more progressive mainstream Christianity. My mother said I never did anything halfway. I never let any grass grow under my feet. So I actually ended up going all the way, becoming an ordained Presbyterian minister and a professor of theology, got a PhD at Princeton, and ended up teaching in Ohio. I'm a New Jersey girl, teaching in Ohio theology to aspiring United Methodist students, seminarians. So I'm not one to do anything halfway. And that's how I ended up doing this. But let me add one more thing. Having been spiritual but not religious, I heard a lot of stereotypes in the church about these people, that they were salad bar, that they were shallow, that they were eclectic, that they, were lazy. I mean, I heard somebody start, and I'm like, I don't think so. That wasn't true of me. I was truly searching. I didn't even know it. Okay. I didn't always know that I was searching, but I was, and God knew it. So, I just thought, these people are either praising them like they're the new spiritual gurus and leaders, or they're putting them down. And I don't know, somehow that doesn't ring true to me, having been one. So I decided to go out on, another kind of pilgrimage and interview them. And I interviewed hundreds. And unfortunately, being an academic and a professor, I was able to take a sabbatical. I was very, privileged and blessed to do that, and got a grant to do my travels. And I interviewed hundreds of them across the entire country, a little bit outside of the country, a little bit in Scotland, a little bit in Mexico, Canada. And what I found was amazing. And so I wrote a book about it. And that's Belief Without Borders, Inside the Minds of the Spiritual But Not Religious. And then my journey that I started with is in the other book, Bloomfield Avenue, A Jewish Catholic Jersey Girl Spiritual Journey. But the journey never ends, and I'm still on it. And so I'm writing a new memoir to talk about additional things. The church is not 100% pure good thing. Okay. I get it. I totally get it. But that's where I found God, or God found me. And I've had wonderful experiences in the church, and I've had, the usual terrible experiences. So it's a mixed bag, and everyone should appreciate that. But I wouldn't just throw it out, because I think that's a horrible mistake.
So that day, like that you woke up and all of a sudden you're an atheist, is that something like you call home and go, so Mom?
Call home? No, never. Oh, I never talked about my religious stuff with my parents. Never.
That was just,
oh, no. They did not want to hear it. Now, they did attend my ordination, and they were like rigid in the pews. They had never even been in a Protestant church before. I mean, they thought I joined a cult. Okay, Presbyterian church, not exactly a cult, but that's how far away they were from religion. And they really didn't think Protestants were that cool. So
wow.
They didn't. My mother wanted to know why I didn't pick a job where I'd make more money, since I had a PhD and I could, but that they didn't understand. They didn't understand. The only positive thing my father said was, well, Linda, at least you didn't become a nun.
Oh, okay.
I didn't tell anybody I woke up as an atheist.
Okay.
But I did, it was like a deconversion. It was like an instant thing. I didn't plan it. It was weird. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I just can't. Having no religious connection, at home growing up, and then, doing the Catholic thing, but then one day waking up and having no belief. Yeah. And then the fact that you still found God, in the midst of all of that is an amazing story. And just, I hope that people find encouragement in there to say it's not over until it's over,
Yeah.
So that spiritual but not religious phase of your life, how long did that?
That was years, several years.
Okay.
Yeah. It was fun. It was interesting. And I really loved later on in life, when I interviewed the spiritual but not religious persons for my books, I really had fun. I mean, they were not those stereotypes that people say. I mean, I met highly intelligent, people that were critical in a good way, not like cynical, but, like really wanted to study things and make sure that they weren't just picking and choosing, just, as one interview said, I don't want to just fill my boat with things that I like. I want to make sure I'm making good choices. So I found, I knew that I was going to respect them because I had been one, but I also wanted to get to know them better, the current ones. And It was a privilege. I heard so many stories. I mean, sometimes the interviews would go on for a couple of hours. And I felt very privileged to be trusted with people's stories. And as a minister, you are trusted with people's stories often. So, but in this case, it wasn't religious people; it was non-religious people that I thought would reject me because, if anything, you would think I was overcommitted to organ. I mean, how much more could I, an ordained minister, a professor of theology, teaching in a seminary? That's kind of like, wow, that's like too much religion. But they appreciated that I was listening to them, and I listened very carefully. I didn't try to teach them. I didn't give them theology. I was sort of reverted back to my journalistic days, and I listened. And I heard that they had they rejected certain doctrines of Christianity that they felt were central to the faith. But basically, a lot of them didn't have any religious experience, so they were just kind of going on hearsay. And so one of the reasons I ended up teaching theology is because I wanted to help people have a better understanding of the faith, a deeper understanding that wasn't going to just rely on either rigid dogma or stereotypes, which is a lot of times, unfortunately, what people get. And they feel that they need to cling on to them so tightly because that's what it means to be a Christian. And I love teaching theology because I could say, there's a lot more, there's a larger playing field here than you think, and if somebody came without boundaries, I'd help them to have boundaries. But if they came with tight little boundaries, I'd help them to open their boundaries up and still be within the faith.
I'm so glad you answered it that way, because that was one of my big curiosities was, were these people that you encounter that are spiritual but not religious, was it all because of something they experienced in the church, or did they, grow up similar to you?
Great question. That's a perfect question, Meg, because we in the church assumed, especially the more liberal branches or progressive branches, oh my God, we must have hurt them. How we hurt them to make them leave? No, I didn't find that. Okay. Oddly enough, interestingly enough, that's not what I found. What they often left, if they even were there, or what they rejected about Christianity was often these rigid forms of doctrine, which not everybody holds those kind of rigid beliefs. And they didn't like that because, they're American. They want freedom. They want choice. They want all that. They want to make their own interpretations. And somewhere in the middle is where I wanted to help them be, so they understood both sides of the issue.
I just I haven't read your books, but I intend to read your books, because as we know, I think that those numbers of spiritual but not religious are growing, and before we had this, when we were talking before we came on the air, I told you that when I was serving as pastor, it was so difficult when the funeral home would call and you would go do a funeral for somebody who was spiritual but not religious, and then just even trying to define, what that meant for someone. Is there a good working definition that you use for what spiritual but not religious means, or is it just what it says?
Well, it's actually a boundary setting title. People want to set themselves off from what they see as a rigid, hyper-political, dogmatic, repressive institution. I don't think that's a very good definition of the church, but a lot of people, it isn't. Okay, it really isn't. But plus the church is so diverse. It's not one thing. So, but that's the stereotype that they hang on to justify the fact that they don't want to be involved in organized religion. And so to them, what spiritual means is that it's personal, is of the heart, it's independent, it's freeing, it's all that. So people that say they're spiritual but not religious feel that they are in a more righteous place than those who say they're within organized religion. So it's actually a title that they wear with pride. And that doesn't mean that they don't have spiritual needs that are not being taken care of. They do use, a lot of things out. There's a lot out there now. There's meditation, there's mindfulness, there's yoga, there's all these health practices. There's plenty of stuff they can go to. And I've done all that myself, especially during my interviewing. And then before, when I was one, I did all those things. But what I found was that I had actual vital, important and deep spiritual questions that ultimately were theological questions, and they couldn't answer those for me. So for a person that views spirituality from the spiritual but not religious perspective, usually spirituality means healthy abundance. It's a very this worldly thing, but the transcendent dimension is often unclear if it exists at all. So it's a very immanent meaning this world and here with us. Immanence is everything, and transcendence is at best a question mark. Okay, but I don't think, but everybody worships something. And I really think that you should worship the highest, And so, because that is where your spiritual needs will be met. So the church, rather than stereotyping, rather than being despairing, rather than getting cynical, rather than circling the wagons and being afraid, this is all completely counterproductive behavior, should instead sit down with anybody they know, usually it's their kids, who are spiritual and religious, or their grandkids, and listen to them and find out what's going on. And they'll hear the stereotypes that these people have of the church, and they probably won't hear a whole lot of trauma, because I didn't. I was looking for it. I wanted to hear it if it was there, but I didn't hear a lot of it. I know it exists, but I think it's an ideology to use to justify not being part of organized religion. Look what those priests did. Look what they want money. They're too political. Yeah, there is that, but that's not the whole picture of what the church is. So I think we should listen to them carefully. And what I found when I listened to them carefully, and I listened appreciatively, of course, is that it was certain beliefs that they rejected, rather than what we think of as they were traumatized by the church. It actually turned out to be theological questions. And the church, unfortunately, at this point, or a lot of people in the church, are not prepared to answer those questions. We've been kind of living on received doctrine without looking at it with any depth. And that's why I ended up teaching theology.
What an amazing journey you've been on. And as you said, it's not over yet.
No.
You've so much more to do. As you talked about interviewing people, and we talked about earlier, you got interviewed by the Today Show, and you've written these books and these articles and all of that. What brings you joy?
Oh, that's that's a good question. Well, there's two sides of it, and it's important that everyone have two sides, I think. Now, on the personal side, my son, my husband, my new puppy, and my beautiful kitty, of course. They're wonderful. That's great. Oh, and then I have a granddaughter from my son David and his wife Kate, and the three of them bring me joy a lot. And so that's how it should be, and that's great. But then when I was a newspaper reporter, one day I was covering, it was like a children's camp or something. I don't know why they sent me there, but I was probably a cub reporter, and that was like an easy story. So I got there, and it was a school that had brought these kids to a camp, and they were having fun. And then they were having an assembly. And so I think the teachers were like searching. They didn't know what to do with the kids. So they said, Linda, you're a reporter. Get up there on the stage and tell them about what it means. And I was like, I had never done public speaking. Okay, never. And I got up on the stage and I started talking, and the kids were like really listening. And I was like, wow, it was it gave me joy. It was amazing. I just thought, wow. And now I didn't immediately run out and become a public speaker, but over time, as I got trained and all, I realized that the teaching and public speaking brought me joy, and it still does, and preaching, and that still does. And I love that, especially in a classroom. You see the lights go on in people's eyes. That's the best. Yeah.
I think that's a great answer, and you're the first person who has ever answered that question, giving the two different sides, the personal, the professional, spirit. So I really appreciate that.
And let me have, I shouldn't interrupt you, but I'm from New Jersey. I can't help it.
No, it's fine.
Writing, although not writing all the time, because writing is very hard, but having written is wonderful. And once you kind of, writing is, you don't know, well, for a lot of writers, you don't know what you're going to say till you say it. So writing helps you understand yourself, but it also helps you communicate with others. And so that brings me joy too.
And I'll just say that we do have somebody that's watching us on Facebook and said thank you. Her name is Shelly. This is thank you because she can really relate to this conversation that we're having. So I wanted to throw that out there and let you know that. But I think that this conversation, these interviews, these listening sessions, whatever you want to call them, are so important. And I appreciate that, when you went in there, that's what you did, was not, hey, I'm going to fix you. I'm going to, point the way to God, to, I'm going to solve all your, Jesus is the only answer kind of thing, that you went in and listened.
Mm-hmm. That's what I needed when I was spiritual but not religious.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, when I ended up at this Christian retreat center in Switzerland, that was the first time anybody actually ever listened to me. And they had answers. Okay, they had a lot of answers. Okay, but they did listen first, and they didn't push anything on me.
That they listened first, though. They listened first.
Right.
And that's so important. And I could probably talk to you for hours at a time, but I know that you're a busy lady, and I want to honor your time. But I do want to mention again, for anyone watching, and we will make this recording available and share it, that Dr. Linda is going to be a part of our Space for Grace conference that is taking place in Kansas City in September. And she's going to be one of the presenters there. And I know that I'm going to sit through her session, and I would encourage folks to register. I can put links down in the notes, along with titles of her book. I'll also make my email address available, and just Google Dr. Linda, and read more about her and watch her interviews, and I promise you won't be disappointed. Dr. Linda, I thank you so much for spending this time with me, for being the first one from the Space for Grace presenters to have a conversation with me. And I look forward to meeting you in person in September. So.
Oh, good. Yeah. We get to meet with Meg instead of just doing everything online. That's
good. Yeah. So I will be there, and I look forward to meeting you in person.
Good. And in case people want to hear more information, or I have a YouTube channel and a website, so that's another place if they want to hear more.
Yeah, I can put all those. I can put your notes for your YouTube and your website there with your book titles and everything else, so people have all your information. I'm happy to do that. So
thank you, Meg, so much.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. So please, everybody, there'll be more of these videos to come, but sign up, register for Space for Grace, come out and meet Dr. Linda and say hello to me while you're out there, and look forward to meeting everybody in September. So
me too. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. And thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.